All right, folks. If you've ever wondered why your brain feels like a scrambled egg before coffee, but somehow your spine is supposed to keep everything in check, you're in for a treat. Today, we've got Dr. Daniel Kimbley in the house. Sir, welcome. Welcome to Beyond Adjustments.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. In my opinion, and from the conversations that we've had, and from what I've read up on Dr. Daniel, he is a chiropractic mastermind. I just got to be honest with you guys. Like he's a nervous system whisperer, the guy who makes sure entrepreneurs, athletes, and parents are firing on all cylinders. We're going to talk about everything from optimizing your brain body connection to building a thriving chiropractic practice. And if you think that means cracking backs and calling it a day, uh, you're way behind the times. Let's get into it. All right. How awesome is my intro video? I don't know if you've caught it in other podcasts, but dude, I love that thing so much. Anyway, Dr. Daniel, welcome again to the show, man. Thanks for being here. Really,
Yeah, thanks for having me. Honored. Always excited to do these.
the honor is all mine, sir. So I'm just gonna jump right in. You built something special with Nexus Family Chiropractic. But before we get into the amazing work you're doing, we're going to do a little bit of a rewind. Every chiropractor has their, I would call it their aha moment. Most chiropractors have their kind of aha moment when they knew this was their calling. And that's what I believe chiropractic is. It's a calling because you really need to also believe in the practices and really study and understand why things work a certain way and et cetera and so on. So simple but hard question. What was yours? You started out in a traditional chiropractic model, but then shifted to neurologically based approach. But before we get into that, I want to know what was kind of your aha moment, because this is not where you started.
Yeah, I feel like I have 50 of them. So I will, this could be a 5 hour long conversation. I'll keep it short though. So if we go back, I was teaching high school English. So that's where I started. And as I was teaching, again, this is a very abbreviated version. I just started asking the question, like, how does the brain actually learn? And everything came back to frontal cortex. And so at the same time that I was kind of asking those questions, we lived in Indiana, my wife and and I was under chiropractic care for the first time, but not because I had pain. I didn't actually even know why I was going. My wife just convinced me after like 6 months that I need to go see Dr. Mike. So I started seeing him and I get all this passion about the brain and the frontal cortex. And then I noticed I kind of had a newfound purpose and energy and like revitalization of what I would say is my soul. And I started asking him why I felt this way. And he kept talking about like, well, you're getting adjusted and it affects the brain. You're getting adjusted and it affects the brain. So I kind of did my own research, not on chiropractic necessarily, but I got to the point where I realized that like we can help people so much in a classroom. But I started asking the question, like, what if we could have school nurses or school chiropractors instead of school nurses? And I got to the point,
Cool.
I got offered a job in administration. And then the next day I quit after 6 years of teaching. And that's when I went and got my doctorate. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you. You glossed over that like it was nothing. I'm gonna stop you for a second because when you and I talked, you got a little bit deeper into your teaching journey. I personally think that's important. I want you to get a little bit into kind of your success in your teaching models and what happened and why you were offered that administration role, because I think it's important for your story, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, no doubt. I appreciate the question. So basically, I started asking, well, how does the brain learn? And there's a bunch of stuff in here, as much detail as you want. Just ask follow up questions. But the long story short is, I learned about this thing called hidden curriculum. Hidden curriculum basically states that while there's being English, math, science, history taught in the classroom, there's also another subset of things being taught that no one ever talks about, and most people don't even know exist. And what I learned from that is that there's a very real connection between the hidden curriculum and like how a student would stay stuck, say, making a certain amount of money, or what the same kind of jobs as their parents did. And it all came back to the prefrontal cortex. And so I realized, like, what I basically learned is that the frontal cortex is responsible for every skill that would make someone successful: grit, willpower, determination, curiosity, goal setting, emotional intelligence, determining good versus bad, right versus wrong. At some point, we'll probably talk about this too, but faith, hope, and optimism. So all of those things are skills, but they can be learned. It's not like we're just born and not born with them.
Right.
So the idea was that I started teaching those skills and kind of stopped really. I was teaching English, but I felt like I wasn't earning my paycheck for what they wanted me to do, because I was just teaching straight up frontal cortex skills. Like, how do we strengthen that part of the brain? So at first, the other teachers were like, there's no way that these kids that are in my classroom that are failing are doing so well in your classroom. You have to just be making it really easy. So that led to like administrators coming in and watching what I was doing, sending other teachers in to see what we were doing. And eventually they're like, hey, we want you to go district wide and teach these strategies in the whole school district.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they wanted me to do.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So would you say then, your love for teaching, because I feel like you do need a love for teaching, especially to be as successful as you were. And then your kind of aha moment, or your newfound knowledge of the frontal cortex and why everything kind of went back to that. And do you feel like kind of the two, that potion or whatever you want to call it, that recipe, is what kind of edged you into chiropractic? Like, yeah, where did that, how did that happen?
Yeah. So what I realized is, like, if I was teaching kids a set of skills, but they were stepping back into an environment where their parents, so I taught in a very urban school district. And so we had a good mix, but low socioeconomic status. I realized that, like, if kids are stepping back into that same home environment, that's probably stressful, probably not eating super clean, then the only way, in my opinion, to truly make change was to be able to teach whole families the principle of how the body heals itself, how the brain is responsible for success, how we can set the internal environment up for that success. And so for me, it only made sense is, like, I could teach the kids this all day long and we would get good results over the course of a year. But my question was, like, if we could teach whole families and I could adjust these kids versus just my teaching strategies, how much more quickly could we get results?
Yeah.
And dude, I have so many case studies from my office to prove out that theory of, like, kiddo not being able to read and 3 months later reading, and then now taking care of them, like 7 years later, they're top of their class, like crushing everything.
That's amazing.
Where they were diagnosed with some learning disability or whatever, and that was just how it's going to be with the IEP and all this stuff. So, like, a lot of my theory when I was teaching and I didn't fully understand chiropractic, it's all proven to be true over the last 7 years of being a chiropractor.
When you started out in chiropractic, it was more of a traditional kind of chiropractic model. And then you shifted to a neurologically based approach, right? So we kind of touched on that a little bit. If we can get into that a little bit, like, what sparked that change for you?
So I had always had a passion, even in chiro school, my main thing was this, is I felt like no matter what, I wanted to tell people the truth about how their bodies worked. I didn't care how hard it was going to be. And I didn't care whether the explanation was going to be easy or how much science it took or whatever it was. I just had this, like, kind of internal desire. I want to tell people the truth. So this might step on toes, but all of the research that I've seen suggests that a bone pinching on a nerve or a squash nerve root is like less than 5% of the time. So I wanted to know, well, what's the other 95% then? Because we're taught, and the easy way to communicate it is like, this bone pinches that nerve, which goes to this thing, which causes those problems.
Sure.
But if the research said that that's not true, because the studies that they did were all in bodies that had been embalmed, meaning they had no fluid in them, I'm like, what's the different explanation? So that led me down, while I was in chiropractic school, this whole idea of like disafferentation and the nervous system and how the adjustments affect the prefrontal cortex. But I didn't really know what to do with that. I was just kind of on this like wandering journey of learning a whole bunch of cool stuff. So I get in practice, and I had like half of my practice in the beginning, they were cool with being pop cracked, like pretty standard approach. But then I had another population they were terrified to have their neck popped. So I started using an arthrostem, which is what they used on me when I was getting adjusted way back in the day in Indiana. But again, the question came up is like, well, how is the arthrostem different than the popping cracking? Or how is this affecting the brain, and like what's happening? So what I've kind of learned over the last 7 years is that based on what side of the body we adjust on and the speed that it happens, that affects a certain side of the brain. So I got into this whole conundrum where I was like, man, I'm adjusting these people, like popping both sides of the neck, both sides of the low back, sending them on their way, kind of doing the same thing on every person. But the other people who I was seeing when I was adjusting with the arthrostem, they're getting results like 33% faster.
Wow.
And so we actually studied it to see. So, and then I realized like, oh, I'm also recommending a third less care. So they get better results more quickly. I don't have to see them as often, which sounds like a crazy business model, but we can circle back to the marketing piece of it in a second.
Yeah.
I know you'll want to go there. But anyway, the big piece of it is I wanted to tell people the truth. When I realized what the truth was, or at least my truth about how the body works on a deep level and understanding the neurology involved, it only made sense that I would take care of everybody that way. And so I just transitioned everybody over. I'm like, we get better results faster. You don't have to come see me as much. We still see you. We love lifestyle care, all those things. It's not like that. But it was just a different approach, and it kind of transformed everything. And again, I just go back to the fact that I feel like I was telling people the raw truth, even though it's hard to explain.
I love that. And I love that you're not just like feeling your way through this. Like there's, you're studying it, you have your case studies, you're comparing cases, you're et cetera. So I love that you're being more of an evidence-based than let's just see how this goes type of practice. So I love that about you. But so transitioning from a standard chiropractic model to focusing on the nervous system, like optimizing that, it sounds like it was a game changer. Must have been a game changer. What was the biggest challenge in making that shift?
For sure, explaining it to people. Because again, it's a 30-second explanation to say, okay, if we look at your x-ray, this bone is out of place. It's pinching this nerve. That goes to your digestive system. That's why you have digestive problems. That's easy. It's way harder to say, hey, your body's actually stuck in this fight or flight state. And because of what happens when you don't fight or run away, that turns off the tiny spinal muscles, which negatively impacts movement of the joints of the spine, which negatively impacts the frontal cortex, plus cortisol shrinks the cells in the frontal cortex. And then that triggered more of a stress response. Right. But the stress hormones also turn off your digestive system. And it has nothing to do with that you have a bone out of place. It's actually because your body's stuck in a subcortical stress response. And now one side's weaker than the other side in terms of the brain. And this is how we have to adjust. You see, there's like two completely dimensions. And so it gets in this rabbit hole. And again, for us is like the game changer though, is that people sit down. I had a mom yesterday, dude. She sits down in tears and she's like, this is her words to me. This is not about me, dude. This is something way bigger. This is a God thing. But she said, why are all these other doctors so dumb that they didn't tell me this? And I'm like, it's just, I was committed to telling you the truth. That is not easy to explain. And she may not have heard it. But since I'm committed to it, it's like a life changer for her and her two kiddos.
Sure. That's amazing.
So,
So that's a lot. And it's a lot to take in, as a patient for you to describe kind of all of that. And I bet you like a lot of them are like checking out halfway through your explanation. But how did a lot of them respond? And did they not show any interest in what you were saying? And then after the treatment, they're like, okay, now I see what you're saying. Like how was the interaction and response from your patients?
I think the response has been amazing. And whether it was, new when I was just kind of figuring out how do I explain this, or now where I feel like I'm really, really good at it, the response is always the same, is that how come nobody else talks about this? And dude, from like a marketing perspective, as soon as it's new and it answers questions that nobody's been able to answer, you have something like very special.
Sure.
So for me, it's been great because I sit with people every day that say, how come nobody's ever talked about this before? And most of the time I just say, because it's hard to explain. And I've committed 7 years of my life, plus all my teaching time that I didn't even talk about, probably more like 13 years of my life, to getting really good at understanding the brain in a way that's easy to explain. I had a kiddo's grandma come in for his third adjustment yesterday. And she's like, I'm a nurse and I want to know what you're doing because I've never seen anything like this before.
I love it.
So it's like, but yeah, dude, that's the general consensus is like, how come nobody else is talking about this? How come nobody else is doing it? Because it's hard.
Yeah. Good for you, man. So you work with families, you work with athletes, entrepreneurs. I mean, everyone under the sun will walk through your door. But why does a nervous system's health play such a huge role in human performance in anyone?
Yeah. So dude, there's so many places to go. I think that what people forget is that, like we talk about conceptually, I think chiropractors do, the nervous system, the brain controls every cell, tissue, organ in the entire body. Which of course it does. But if you truly believe that, then my question is always like, well, why aren't we actually addressing the brain then? So we'll go like, oh, there's a subluxation in your spine. There's a bone out of place in your x-ray. Let's put that bone back into place. But that's a focus on the spine, not on the brain.
Right.
But we acknowledge that the brain tells the body what to do.
Right.
So from a performance perspective, people will eat clean all day. They'll take their supplements all day long. They'll cold plunge. They'll do the sauna. They'll invest in all this stuff. They'll pay for meditation courses. But I'm like, if our body's stuck in a stressed out state, that negatively affects our digestion of supplements and our food. It negatively affects our recovery in the gym. It negatively affects our connection to God, and our ability to meditate or pray or whatever it is. We know that stress hormones turn off the cortex, which negatively affects our relationships. So everybody tries like all of these things that are, I don't want to say they're hacks. Some of them are hacks, but we're trying to do everything, not realizing that if the body's in a stressed out state, none of those work as well as they could. And that's why it doesn't matter for performance. It doesn't matter. That's why the nervous system is key.
Yeah. So how do you track improvements in brain function and nervous system regulation in your patients?
Yeah, great question. So if we're talking about, this is where, don't get me too far off on a tangent. Just pull me back if I get too crazy.
Got it. Yeah.
There a lot of people out there, like I've seen it in my community where everybody's saying like we're neurologically based, but nobody actually measures the brain. They're just adjusting, which is fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. So what we do a series of neurological tests. So we have 5 or 6 tests that measure the frontal cortex. We have 4 or 5 tests that measure the cerebellum. We have a few tests that measure the brainstem. And then based on what we find in those tests that tells us how we would adjust somebody on what side of the body. And so there's a whole other level, like functional neurologists are very smart at this, but a lot of times they focus more on the therapy part than the adjusting the spine part. And so we're literally measuring the brain with the tests that we do. And it's more than just HRV because it measures the autonomic system, but it doesn't measure the brain.
What kind of testing is it?
So just a series of neurological tests. So there's like Romberg, Sharpen-Romberg, Mittelmeyer. We do an alternating hand-fist test. There's a test we call UPDRS. We look at eye tracking and just some really basic stuff that you learn in chiropractic school to test for pathology. But those same tests can be also used to measure very baseline neurological function as well.
And then I guess you would track the improvement based on the start and then maybe one milestone or midpoint of their treatment to see if they're improving and whatnot.
Yep. We measure it along the way. So we'll look at like I'll give you an example of one that was kind of like viral for just a second, was the eyes closed marching in place, which is Mittelmeyer test. So if someone moves when they're marching, like you can get very objective data to say, hey, you didn't march as far from the first time or the second time that we did your re-exam or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a direct indicator of how aware their brain is of the body and space without the eyes. And so that's one example of being able to like objectively measure what's happening with the nervous system.
Gotcha. I'm going to throw a challenge question out.
Yeah.
If you had one sentence, I'll give you a phrase, actually. It doesn't have to even be one sentence.
Yeah.
To explain the power of neurologically based chiropractic to someone skeptical, what would that be?
Based on the research, when we adjust the spine at a certain speed, that affects the part of the brain that's responsible for faith, for hope, for optimism. That's high level.
Yeah.
But that would be for somebody who's skeptical, I would probably just go look at Roger Sperry's Nobel Prize winning 90% of nutrition and stimulation to the brain comes from movement of the joints of the spine.
Okay. I'll give you that. I like it. All right. So when most people think of chiropractic, they picture pain relief, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe fixing a sore back or neck. But your work goes way beyond that. You focus on performance, optimization, helping patients reach like really their full potential, honestly. So let's talk about how that applies kind of across different groups. Your practice is heavily family centered. How does chiropractic care impact childhood development, and why is early care so crucial?
Yeah. So first, I think understanding that there's a bunch of studies now that support this, that prenatal care, so before babe's first breath of life, by the second trimester, a fight or flight, what they would call pain or pleasure response in utero is already developed by second trimester. So that was to say, if mom's stressed out during pregnancy, those stress hormones are negatively impacting the growth and development of the neural tube, which then becomes the brain eventually, through a series of layers, endoderm, mesoderm, ectoderm, and the other parts of the body too. So by second trimester, that pain pleasure response is developed. And that would implicate that like a mom who's more stressed out is going to birth a baby into the world that's going to be more primed for a fight or flight response. Mm. So that's pre first breath of life. So this is why I love taking care of pregnant mamas, because I truly believe that we're setting kiddos up from their first breath to be more successful based on brain development. Gotcha. If we get into kiddos, and again, I could use that example that I talked about from yesterday. We're doing an exam with a boy who's 6, but mom was super stressed during pregnancy, has him, he's colicky in the first 3 months. So chiro could have definitely helped with that. And then a bunch of issues at 2 where she thought there were behavioral issues, but all the doctors are like, oh, he'll just grow out of it. And dude, she's seen like 50 practitioners with her kiddo now. He's 6. And we get to a point where now he has these wicked behavioral issues that are pretty obvious in school. And to me, setting them up is crucial, because that foundational laying of, we can just say neuroplasticity in the first 2 years of life, our brain grows 90% of its connections in the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then everything after that is adaptation for the most part. There's some pruning and some other stuff that happens. But again, if we miss those first 2 years, they're already on the trajectory to be more fight or flight. And remember, fight or flight is going to weaken the frontal cortex. It's going to weaken our grit, willpower, emotional connection, faith, hope, optimism, our behavioral regulation. So then we see a kiddo who has behavioral issues at 6 years old, and it's like, yeah, his brain's just weak because he's been stressed out his entire life. So again, going back to teaching, it's like, how do we set kiddos up and not catch them when they're in high school and try to right those wrongs, quote unquote. So that's why, to me, kids are so important. Actually, they're the most important. And then they set up our future, like one day they're going to be the ones running the country. So why would we not want them clear from first breath of life?
Sure. So let's take a case, a high school student, comes in and, high stress, panic attacks, anxiety, those kind of things, which I believe are, a product of, their years before and their experience and the stress that they've endured, and their upbringing, et cetera, and so on, right? Their external environment. So someone like that walks in, high school student, college student, whatever. Is there hope for someone like that? Or are we talking about we need to catch this way earlier in order to actually see improvement in that part of our brain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easier if we catch it sooner. The unfortunate problem is that most people are trained to not think there's an issue until there's an issue.
Sure.
And, so that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, dude, 100% there's hope for that kiddo. The same reason that there's hope for, 40-year-old adults who I take care of who have had depression their whole lives, who are like, I'm doing better than I ever have in my entire life that I can remember. It's just we have to rewire the neurology. And the way we do that is by adjusting and creating balance in the brain.
What's the biggest misconception parents have about chiropractic for their kids?
They're not in pain, so they don't need it.
Mm.
Because there's so many chiros that are just marketing pain.
Right.
And we could talk about pediatric chiropractics too. It's like a lot of those are still talking about ear infections and immune system stuff or sleep issues, and it's all symptom based. There's no optimal performance with a kiddo. And I wouldn't use those words necessarily, but I'm talking about setting kids up from their first breath to be successful. And I don't think any parent wouldn't want that for their kids, but unless they know, they don't know.
Right. Yep. I get that. I was in that boat, in a few of those boats actually, right? Believing that chiropractic care was just for pain relief, or, you need to go to the chiropractor after an accident, or, kind of like that PI approach, right? Really, that's what chiropractic care was for me. My kids as babies and toddlers and didn't go to the chiropractor. They're going now, but we were almost forced into that. But being forced into it, we've learned so much, right? The fact that they do have scoliosis and that we do have to get them treated, put us in a place where, okay, now we're learning so much about chiropractic. Like, oh man, I wish I knew, right? I wish I knew. And that's really why we're doing this show, is because we want to get the word out to as many people as possible that, hey, look, just there is a preventative piece, right, to a healthy life. And chiropractic is the way, specifically neurologically based chiropractic care, and not just the, joint approach. I really do believe that. I've spoken to many chiropractors that are neurologically based, which every chiropractor is really neurologically based, because we're talking about the same thing here, but the approach is a little bit different when they really call that out, or when they're focused on pediatric, right? That they know that it makes a difference when kiddos go see them, so that kind of thing. And we just want to get that word out. Okay, so let's shift gears a little. You work with high performing business owners as well.
Yep.
I know people are people, but what's the connection between kind of spinal health, brain function, and peak like productivity?
Yeah. So the frontal cortex focuses attention for one. So, somebody who's scattered, can't focus, jumps from thing to thing to thing. That's just a product of neurochemistry and how the brain is wired or not based on the decisions that somebody's made. Mm-hmm. And then you get into a whole thing of like, not just decision-making, but a grit, willpower. We could talk about leadership, dude. There's a whole bunch of studies that show inverse correlation between cortisol and testosterone. And so what they find is that people who have lower levels of cortisol are perceived as better leaders, and they end up being better leaders. So that is to say, if the brain's not in a stressed out state, people are going to be better leaders. So we talk about high level, entrepreneurs, business owners, whatever, like literally their decision-making, their connection to their team, their leadership ability, and their perceived leadership ability is going to go up, not just from themselves, but from other people too, based on all the research. And these are like Harvard studies. These aren't some out of nowhere, like random studies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the correlation's great. And dude, I've seen so many cool things with business owners and like, people making money. Everybody wants to hear those stories, but there are lots of breakthroughs that I've seen when we wake up people's brains and what's possible. And that's I think the coolest part and the takeaway from all of it is that like everybody has that same potential. It's already within all of us. We have the same
Yeah.
brain structures for the most part. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
Tell me about a case where, these adjustments or your approach to health care led to a major, like a cognitive or performance breakthrough.
Yeah, I think my favorite one, probably not the biggest or most important one. The bigger breakthroughs for me come from what happens when people start connecting more with their families instead of just being business driven. But my all-time favorite story, I have a client named Nick. We've taken care of him for a long time. He's built lots of businesses. He's burnt lots of businesses. Amazing dude, high-level entrepreneur. And so one of his goals when we sat down with him on day one, he's like, I want to do $1 million in a day. It's like, I've never done it. I want to. That's one of my goals. And he's like, if you can help me with that, he's like, I'll be here forever. And so like 4 weeks in, he comes in and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe it. He said, I just did my first $1 million day on Saturday at this event that I was at. He sold $1 million from stage. So I share that because he's like, dude, I haven't changed anything. And he's like, I don't really know what it was, but he was just that much clearer and not feeling the weight of his stress as much to just be able to connect with that audience the way he did. And obviously, like, the dude works hard. I can't take away any of that. He has a ton of business acumen, but we just get these little neurological interferences out of the way and get his body in its optimal state. And cool stuff like that happens all the time.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So we talked about family, kids, prenatal, business owners. Let's touch a little on athletes, because injury prevention, right, and performance for them is huge. So what does your approach look like for optimizing recovery, physical performance,
Yeah, the coolest part about what we do, so I only do adjustments in my office. So I don't prescribe nutrition. I'll give people exercises if they need them. Some people would think this is like complete blasphemy, but I find that I want to save my lane of waking up the brain. We do such a good job at that usually the body will take care of itself. There are some extenuating circumstances, but for athletes, like, we're doing the same thing with entrepreneurs, as athletes, as people who were chronic 40 years of back issues and multiple spinal surgeries, as we are for the, 2-3 month old. It's just a matter of measuring the brain. That's different, and how we adjust. So not everybody gets the same care, but it looks pretty similar. So we're only adjusting. But the cool, like, athletes are interesting because athletes generally come and they're like, well, I need more force, or I need like massaged harder. And everybody talks about their musculoskeletal system, but nobody connects the bridge for them that their brain is actually telling them to recover. So again, if we go back to fight or flight being stuck in the system, we know that the stress hormones actually break down muscle tissue and connective tissue. But that's what we do when we work out and when we exercise. So like, a lot of times people just aren't in peak recovery mode and they don't even know it until they start getting adjusted. And then they're like, hey, I PR'd every single lift in the last 3 weeks and I've changed nothing at all. And we're like, yeah, because now your nervous system feels a sense of safety to let you lift heavier and you actually start recovering. So hopefully that answered the question.
It did. That's so cool, man.
Yeah. And people like, I had a woman one time when I first started practicing, she said, I want to get one strict pull up. I've been working on it for like 6 months. And we started adjusting her, and like 2 weeks later, she comes in. She's like, hey, I did 3 strict pull-ups.
Wow.
And it was already in her.
One.
Yeah, man, we just got to wake up the brain.
Shame on me. Yeah.
No, not at all.
That's a goal of mine too. So I'm in, I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time when we chatted, and actually I don't know if I was in it at that point, but I have a health coach. He's actually my chiropractor. And we're doing some, he's giving me some exercises and things like that. And one of the things that I want to get in by my 8th week, I'm 4 weeks in, started week 5 just now, is a pull-up, just one. I just want one. All right. Yeah. So I'm doing that. Like, I'm feeling a lot stronger and stuff. And, I'm doing my lifts and all that. It's great. My push-ups, all that, no problem. But I have a lot of weight and stuff, but I feel like I can get my body to the point where I can pull myself up. Still haven't been able to do that. But that's one of my goals too. So we'll see what happens.
You got this. You got this.
I appreciate that. So if somebody wanted to unlock their full potential through chiropractic, what's the first change they should make in their daily routine?
find a chiropractor who addresses the brain and start getting adjusted. Like, I'm so biased, dude. That's always going to be my first thing.
Listen, the truth
I
is
live
the
it.
truth.
My family lives it. That's the deal. Find a neurologically based chiro that will tell you the truth and wake up your brain.
So how about for you? Do you have someone that maybe a mentor or somebody that just you believes and knows what you know?
Yeah, 100%. So I've had an interesting journey locally where we live. There are not a lot of people who do. I mean, there's nobody who does what we do, but I've had trouble finding a good chiro, right?
Mm,
Now I have an intern who and I had an associate in the past too. So we trained them to do exactly what I do, the exact way that we adjust, the exact analysis that we do. So they take care of me regularly. Like, I mean, last week, think I got adjusted 3 times last week. So just crazy amount of stress, taking on a lot, doing a lot of stuff, which is cool. It's great.
for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, dude, for me, it's integral, you know? And if it's not, if I didn't have him as an intern, there's an upper cervical doc locally that I'll go see. I'm not getting adjusted. It's a number one thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%. All right, cool. Okay. I'm going to shift gears now. And this is where I geek out. My audience knows this, but I rein it in, I promise, because I want to hear from you more than I want to speak about this. But we're going to talk about the business and the marketing, right? Building a kind of standout practice. All right. So switching gears, you know, you don't just run a clinic. You built a brand, really. And if you do it right, building a brand, that is, it's very hard not to be successful, especially if you're consistent in building that brand. And you said a term, you said a sentence earlier, and you said, I stay in my lane. I do what I do well, and I stay in my lane. And that's important for chiropractic. It's important for any business, honestly. But again, you're not just running a clinic, right? You're running a business, and that takes more than just patient care. So let's talk business.
Let's go.
What were the biggest lessons in growing Nexus Family Chiropractic into what it is today?
Oh man, there's so many. I would say dude, you said it honestly, is consistency, is the way in which you show up everywhere. So we could talk about online, but just not that. It's like the consistency with which you show up and the way that you show up, I think speaks more than what you do or how much you know. Because I see one of the biggest failures I see is people will be consistent with something for like 2-3 weeks. And then when people come to seek them out, they drop it. And so then it's like, you think about a business, we'll go outside of chiropractic for a second, but think of somewhere like Chipotle. Dude, if I go to Chipotle in New York versus a Chipotle in California, it's the same. It's so consistent.
That's right.
So the same is true where it's like, if your adjustments or your mindset isn't consistent, when you're taking care of people, people feel it. If you're social media, you say like, hey, I'm doing this podcast, and you do it for 3 episodes and then you drop off.
And you stop. Yeah.
Yeah. So consistency, I would say, is the number one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And I think you're right. It's the same in any business, specifically mine, and I've seen it in my own business, and like even this podcast. You know, when I first started this podcast, it was just an outlet for me to teach people. Right. I actually didn't even think about inviting chiropractors on the show initially. If you go back to my first episodes, you won't even hear my voice. It's just information of me kind of, pulling, journal articles and things I'm learning through, and then putting it all together. And then I was like, wait, this is good. Yeah, people are listening, and this is good information, but I need to get more real world. Let's get in front of people's faces. Let's get some video out there. And then even though that the initial growth wasn't steady, once I was like, all right, let's just build on that, right? Yeah, being consistent is one thing, but dropping and starting something new is not always the right way to go. Building on a strong foundation is something else. The foundation for our podcast was just getting the information out there, like teaching people what chiropractic care is all about, getting DCs to learn more about what they need to know when they're starting up a practice, et cetera, and so on. That will never change. Maybe the way we, put the information out there, the media out there, that might change over time. Like it went from audio to video. Who knows what's next? Maybe live is next, right? I don't know. But consistency is key. And it's true for every business. I don't care if you're in a chiropractic business. So emerging DCs, like hear this and hear this well. Like when you jump into your business, first and foremost, you need to know why you're in it to begin with. Let that be your foundation. Why are you even starting a chiropractic business? What's your why? And then work on your brand. Then with that brand, be consistent, because consistency is key. And when I say brand, I mean everything from the doorknob to your adjusting table, right? From the foyer to your reception desk to maybe a coffee station, everything matters. Every moment that a patient walks through your practice matters. That's what I mean when I say brand. And then of course, shifting online, everything needs to stay consistent as well. But that's another story. But I got a question for you, Dr. Daniel. If you had to start from scratch today, what would you do anything different?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would do different, I would go back and try and pre-sell packages before I ever open my doors. So I was a little bit more, I'll say reactive in the beginning, where it was like, I'm not going to do anything until I have my license. But if I knew what I know now, I think I would go back and, at least for like a founding members thing, create a membership model and have people pre-sold on before day one. So that I could guarantee a patient base. And like, we did fine doing it the way we did, but I think it was just a way easier way to do it. But I didn't know what I didn't know about business back then. So that would be the number one thing.
Can you expand on that, your membership model? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like, I don't have a membership model currently. So we still do care plans, but we don't see anybody visit by visit. But what I mean by that is like, let's just say that, you have, car insurance would be a good example. Is you pay car insurance, but usually they're going to want like part of the premium up front, and then you have monthly payments after. So maybe we say like, okay, hey, we're going to do for the first 25 or 50 people or whatever it is. And if you're doing insurance, you probably can't do this because this gets into a whole compliance thing. That's not my lane either. So If you do insurance, just ignore this. But first 25, 50 people, whatever it is, that we're going to do a like lifetime membership thing. And let's say it's X amount of dollars for the year, and you can split it up into 12 payments of whatever.
Right.
And then they're like, first they get priority. I would make like special access for it and just discounted. Cause then like what you can do is, even though you may not get the fee that you want for those people on the front end for like their cash paying patients, you could at least start to build a relationship and do referrals.
Yeah.
And so I was just starting like day one is like, we had one new patient, and then we had to build it from there versus having 25, 30, 40 people signed up, ready to already commit and like a legacy kind of package offer.
Love that. So you built a strong personal brand, at least from what I see, and a really strong digital presence as well. What marketing strategies worked best for you?
Okay, so I gotta define marketing and advertising, because I think they're two different things, and I think people get confused. So you can correct me if you think that I'm wrong. I'm okay with that. But I think that marketing is just connecting with people.
Okay.
So a lot of people think that marketing is like running ads. Advertising is running ads. And so delineating that marketing is just creating a connection. People want to know that you understand them and that you care. And the best marketers in the world are really good at hooking people, because a hook is just a connection point. So from a marketing perspective, I think the most important thing that you could possibly do is understand the people that you want to take care of on a deep level and actually listen to them. Because this is what, dude, I'll give a tip on this. If you have new patients coming into your practice, ask them what their goals are and actually listen to them and go deeper and analyze like, what are they truly saying? And then that gets to be your marketing material for other people.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm not going to correct you, but I will say it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So I think some people do get it wrong. You're right. Marketing and advertising are not synonymous, but I would say that advertising is a subset of marketing,
For sure.
because marketing is an umbrella, right?
Yep.
You use it as a tool, as an outlet, as a channel, with subsets, with subcategories. Advertising is one of them. Your socials are another. Community engagement is another. It's all marketing. When you meet somebody in the supermarket, a patient that you have, and you shake their hand and ask them how they're doing, that's all part of the marketing piece. Yes, it needs to be genuine, of course, when you're,
Yep.
face to face, but it's all about marketing. And then it all comes down to your why. It all comes down to, why are you even doing this to begin with? If you're in it to make a buck, listen, you're still helping people by adjusting them. So do you, whatever. But you make a bigger difference when your why is incorporated in everything you do. So if your why is literally stitched into your marketing plan, meaning, let's talk brand, let's talk marketing, and then you stitch that like literally from the top or even from the ground, however way you want to look at it, ground up or umbrella view, it doesn't matter. But that will kind of infuse everything that you do, whether it be a digital presence, right? If you're posting, social posts, or, YouTube videos, education, because there's a difference in your approach, not just your what you post, it's how you post it. Because then, we're talking about, education posts versus, uh, um, case studies or whatever tips, right? Because you have like the storytelling aspect also under the marketing, you have the education aspect under the art. It's all there, whether it's on your website or in a pamphlet in your office, it's all the same thing. But I would just say that advertising is a subcategory or subset of marketing versus kind of two separate entities. That's just kind of how I would approach it. Yeah. But a little follow up there for you, right? Because like I mentioned, when you're posting online, there's different ways of doing it, different formats, different ways of speaking to your audience, right? You have the patient education piece, and then you actually have the storytelling piece.
Mhm.
How do you balance the two?
I'm always I'm heavy on education, but
I could have guessed
again,
that.
dude, I'm biased. The reason I care about education so much is because if someone, again, it goes back to, if we think about connecting with somebody, and this is just straight neuroscience. So like, there's a reticular activating system in the brain. It's going to look for what it's trained to look for. Everybody's heard the thing of like, if you want to buy a red car, then you start seeing that car everywhere. So the reticular activating system is trained to pay attention to three things: what it's scared of, what it values, and what is new or novel. And so for me, if I can get people to go, oh my gosh, I've never heard that before, they want to listen more. And then what happens is, because we're good at education, I have somebody who comes into my practice that I don't have to convert their mindset once they get there. They're
Mhm.
already pretty much like, I kind of know what you do. I want to know how it can help me specifically and personally. And then like, what's it cost? And
Right.
so there's not a bunch of like skepticism, or I have to change their mind about, they thought it was this,
Sure.
but it's really this. And just makes life easy. So then I don't waste my time trying to chase a bunch of people who were never
Mhm.
good for office in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the education piece, I think you need value hooks in there, in
Yep.
my opinion. And I think those value hooks are what's going to grab their attention before they listen to anything else. So you find that pain point. I mean, I do it in my own business, right? I find the chiropractic pain point of, not having a steady patient flow, right? That's kind of how I put my information out there. Or just, the consistency aspect is always a pain point, or not knowing what to do when it comes to marketing, etc. So there's a value hook, right? And then when you educate them to say, okay, there's an actual solution for this problem. um, or again, in my business, sorry to bring it up again, but like, I have this 90 patients in 90 days. That gets people's attention. It's way more than that, but they're like, how can he guarantee, right? So it sparks that interest. So it's that value hook. For you, it might be, hey, you might be speaking about children that are suffering with a certain, issue, or whatever. I wouldn't say education, but more of like they're struggling with, I don't know. expressing their feel, whatever. I don't know. It could be anything that you post out there,
Yep.
and then you would value hook that audience, and then they'd be like, oh, this guy is just talking about something I experienced last week. And then you tell them, okay, there is a solution for this. Let's talk, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you bridge the gap between patients who come in for the pain relief and those who commit to long-term care?
Yeah, we are probably different in this aspect. So when I sit down with someone, one of the first conversations we have is that if you think that I'm here to fix you, you're in the wrong place. I'm not the fixer. God gave each of us the gift of healing. And if we disagree on that, then we can't work together. So I won't charge anybody a penny if they disagree, because then it puts me, so if we think about like marketing and kind of trying to create like a blue ocean strategy, if you will, if I'm competing against pain relief, like they could go to Costco and buy a massive bottle of ibuprofen and take that every day. It costs $14 and our exam is $195. So like I'm not trying to compete against a $14 Advil ibuprofen model.
Sure. 100%.
And so, from that perspective, that's one of the easiest ways to bridge it, because then if somebody says, well, I don't want to do that, then it opens up a conversation of like, okay, well, what are you here for then? And then that gets back to, again, if we talk about marketing, they can say like, yeah, I want to get out of pain, but I want to be able to play with my kids again. And so then that can be a hook for what I do online and what I talk about, because I know if that one person wants that, likely there are a bunch of other people who are looking for that same thing too. Yeah. So listening becomes our greatest asset and our greatest tool to be able to reach more people.
That's awesome. Because I think a lot of chiropractors struggle with patient retention. And I think I think that piece is missing. Full transparency. I had this last question I asked you was a follow-up for me. But I felt like it was more the core as we were talking, right? Because I feel like bridging the gap in that sense. And I only asked it because I felt like I knew you were going to go there in your answer. But education is key. Like, getting on the same page with your patient is key to patient retention. Because if you start off on the wrong foot, it's just like any relationship, any marriage. If you start off on the wrong foot, if you don't have the same core values, then there's not much further that you can go. There won't be much substance there. So I love that answer, but do you have any systems that you put in place to kind of place systems in place to keep patients engaged long-term?
Yeah, for sure. There are plenty. I think I'm highly biased on client experience just throughout the office. So from day one, so and you kind of mentioned it when we were talking about consistency, is like what your office looks like. Or like, so every morning, I learned this from one of my mentors, but I'll sit in every chair in our waiting room and look around the room to see like, are there spider webs? Is there like a piece of dust bunny? So that consistency piece I think is huge, because even if people don't ever outright think it, I think subconsciously, especially because chiropractors generally, like, they're quacks, they're second-rate doctors, they're doctors who could get into med school, there can already be some skepticism. So it's like, I'm looking for the clock that's the wrong time, or the like whatever, to just be like, I knew there was something about them. No, I'm not going to come. So like, and dude, I've heard this stuff before. So that's why I'm like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but so I think consistency is a piece of it. But then in terms of like creating relationships with people from a retention standpoint, you got to remind people why they're there regularly. So we do re-exams, we compare all their findings, we sit with them and do that, and we can look at them side by side through like multiple different visits across time. Then the other thing that we're big on is like, we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate their graduation into phases of care, we celebrate anniversaries with them. Anything that I hear, we'll try and just create it so it's like a family style. And dude, if you knew how many times people, like, I'll give you a simple example. Somebody gets a promotion at work. So again, we're all about performance. Like, I'm not just getting people out of back pain. So somebody gets a promotion at work, stoked on it. We'll get them a coffee mug that says like, hey, like, you're the boss now, or something, whatever.
So cool. Yeah.
If you knew how many times people are like, that's the nicest thing that anybody's ever done for me. And I'm like, bro, we got you a coffee mug. Like, you're married, and you probably people just take it so personally.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Like, that's the biggest thing for us on retention. is
Yeah.
really just creating experience where they're like, dang, dude, they like truly care about me.
Yeah, that's it. Showing that you care. Then, and
Mhm.
I've said this in the past. I think to get a patient to commit to long-term care, you need to show them
Yeah.
you care. Because at the end of the day, if you don't make that connection and it just becomes a business transaction, then you're not going to get far with that patient. Nor are they going to experience the relief, because it's also a mindset. If they're not expecting something to happen, sometimes it doesn't happen because our brain doesn't allow us to experience that relief. So,
Yeah.
I think that's key. I love that. All right, I'm gonna close. I'm gonna close us out with a challenge question for you,
Yeah.
because I could talk about this all day. The marketing aspect, that is. But what's one marketing mistake chiropractors make that kills patient trust, and how can they fix it?
Oh man. I think it's the bait and switch. It's like, hey, come in for pain. Let's market pain. And then on the backside, we're like lifestyle care.
Ah,
I think that kills people more than anything. So again, which is why we have our system set in place where it's like, I'm telling somebody straight up, like, hey, this is not a one and done thing. There will be recommendations based on what we find. It's going to be
right.
longer term. But I think too many people come in and they expect like one adjustment on the first visit. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to try to do, then if I market that way, then it's like I have this huge hurdle to overcome
Hmm.
because they're there for something that now I have to convince them that they're actually not there for. They're there for something else.
So be open and honest from the get go.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
don't bait switch. Like, if it's to me, and again, I'm biased, like, we just don't market symptoms. Like, you can go in and look at any of our posts. I'm not talking about pain.
Hmm.
Like, it just doesn't. We talk about performance, we talk about connection, we talk about God, we talk about faith, we talk about joy.
Mm.
But there's no neck pain, back pain, headaches. We talk about stress a lot, but that's something we can all deal with, that we all
Of
deal with and
course.
relate to, you
Of
know?
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think being true to yourself and being true to the patient, I think, is key. I love that, because that stigma that's out there around chiropractic care, um, it doesn't help it. At least it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't hurt it, because it just kind of keeps the same tone across of, okay, chiropractors are just in it for, it's a scam and all that. But being true from the beginning is important. Now, I think a lot of chiropractors, at least from the folks that I've spoken to, their concern is, if they don't speak about the thing that's spoken about the most, they're not going to attract patients. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true. I'm here to tell you that if you speak the truth about what you know about the body and what it does and how you can get it into its optimal position to heal itself as the way God designed it to, I believe that patients will flock to your practice, especially when they're seeing results, especially when you talk about mindset, especially when you connect with them um, at an emotional level too. Just like Dr. Daniel was saying, show them you care. Ask them about their jobs, ask them about their marriage. Like, don't get too personal and weird about it, but just ask them how they're doing, right? Say happy birthday when they walk in, because it's their birthday, and so on. So all those things matter. And yeah, the bait and switch is the worst. If you're offering a $49 special, listen, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
I never recommend that to any of my clients. But if you are offering that, just provide that. And if anything, if you want to follow up with more care, then do that after the fact. Don't try to bring them in, give them the adjustment, and then offer them a care package for 6-7 grand, which they might need. But use that tool of bringing them in with that $49 special as just bringing them in. Okay, you can just call that a lead magnet, right? And then they'll come in, they'll know you exist, they'll experience how amazing you are, right? And how kind you are, and how they feel better, etc., and so on. And then just just leave it at that. And then there's always follow-ups with texts and emails, and you can nurture them that way by sending them more information. But don't, like Dr. Daniel was saying, don't bait and switch them, because that'll hurt it'll hurt the tone of your brand. And that's just not going to help you in the long run.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think what it really comes down to is like, it's just identity, really. Like every chiro is going to practice a little differently, but like for me, I don't get adjusted for pain. Why would I only want that for my clients that I take care of? Like exactly. I do it for performance. If it's good enough for my family, why is it not good enough for everybody? That's like my identity. That's my heart. So I just pour that into what we do, because that's people don't have to do it like me, but I think that's really what it gets down to, is like, when you know what your why is, you know what your core values are, you'll just not compromise on any of it. And it's just an identity thing. And that carries over into the music you play in your office, how you communicate, all the stuff. So 100%.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I could sit on this all day, but we're going to shift gears. So the way we look at health is changing fast, honestly. At least I think so. Or maybe because I have my ear to the ground, I'm noticing it more, but more people are realizing that real wellness isn't about waiting until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's about keeping the body in a state of peak performance. So where do we go from here, right? Like where do you see the biggest growth opportunities for chiropractic care in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. You mentioned in the beginning is like, I think that and again, this is just a philosophical thing, is like actually measuring the brain, not just the autonomic system, but actually measuring different parts of the brain. I think that's a huge place for growth. There's some things I would like to implement in my practice, but I don't see somewhere technology will catch up, but like something like phase angle, which most people don't even know what phase angle is, but it's something that I would love to be able to quickly measure inside of my practice. So what phase angle is measuring reactance and impedance of how electricity flows between the cells and then through the water in your body. Oh, and you get this number. Cool. So phase angle is directly correlated to someone's wellness. So like increased muscle mass, increased phase angle. And so like it's a really good way to measure, again, the autonomics or like the holistic health of someone's body. But it's stupid expensive to measure. And it can't be that, like, only hospitals do it for the most part. And I don't know. If there's chiropractic, dude, I would love some chiropractors to do research on this. I'm not the research guy, so I love to read the research, but I don't want to do it because I tried that and my brain goes too far too fast. But like, yeah, dude, measuring phase angle to show people, hey, here's your progress and how your system has literally changed along the way, outside of just a thermal scan or HRV, I think is something that's super cool that hopefully will take off. More so selfishly for me, because the technology needs to catch up to be affordable to do it.
I'm gonna send you some information on this testing. This company's been around for a long time. Want to get your take on it, but I'll do that after the show. I think it's a good chiropractic compliment, but I want to know what your take on it is, because I love your approach to care, and I feel like your opinion would hold strong, at least in the back of my brain, for it. But anyway, that's I'll send you some info on that. Let me know what you think. But do you see neurologically based chiropractic becoming more mainstream or more of a niche, or?
No, I think it's becoming that, and that's where it's tricky, because like it's becoming mainstream for people to say that, but to, in my opinion, like actually practice it all the way through is a different thing. So that's where, like, dude, I've had people people who are high level, who understand the marketplace and understand business. And they're like, why do you call yourself a chiropractor? You could just totally set yourself apart. But I go the opposite, where I'm like, no, we're doing real chiropractic, and like everybody else can call themselves something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that will just continue to be a thing. I think as more people understand the neurology and the neurophysiology and the structures within the brain, that's just going to continue to grow, where will become commonplace probably in the next 10 years. Let's see. Yeah, dude, that's probably the biggest one. That's where my passion and my heart lies, really.
Gotcha. Okay, so chiropractors are, so you said it right. It's becoming a mainstream phrase, neurologically based.
Yeah.
But there are some that are starting to integrate things like, HRV tracking and functional health testing and new technologies, and so on. But what excites you the most about it?
About the future?
About this trend, like of going towards, this type of, tracking and testing and functional health and
Yeah, I think this is what excites me the most. So in my practice right now, this is what I'll get is the person who's seen 4 other chiropractors, haven't really had good results. Their friend told them that this is totally different and they should come check it out. I get excited in the fact that that stops happening. And so we know, and again, dude, there's like a science to the speed that's involved in the adjustment and on the side of the body that's done to affect different structures in the brain. So there's all these little nuances, but like, that's when I sit with somebody and I tell them like, hey, for sure, this thing that you've had for 40 years that nobody else could help you with, your body can take care of it on its own with the right balance inside of your brain. I just have some cool tricks to help you get your brain balanced out. And so like, dude, it would just eliminate the need for people to stop chasing. I think it would eliminate chiropractic didn't work. And we would just start to see results at a way higher level where then chiropractic wouldn't be the just back pain, neck pain, headaches. It would literally be this is the thing that you do. It's like going to the gym or counting your macros, where it's like everybody does it. If you want to perform at the highest level, if you want your brain to work better, like cold plunge is second, sauna is second, red light is second, methylene blue is second, and chiropractic's like the number one thing that everybody knows to do. That's what I get excited about.
Nice.
Yeah.
So do you think that there are things that are more overhyped versus being a game changer in chiropractic tech that's kind of coming out right now?
Like give me some examples on is there anything you can think of?
Yeah. So there's things like the laser therapy and, I know upper cervical has been around for a while, but now it's becoming more of a trend. Things like that, like, but more, what's that, that table called the detraction? Nope.
Oh, decompression
Tables and things like that. So like, is there anything that you can think of that I would say that's more new in the industry, that's really overhyped and they need to tone it down a little bit versus, oh my gosh, I can't wait till this thing blows up and takes over the world?
There's nothing dude, there's a lot of things that I think are overhyped, but again, I'm so biased. I'm like, just get adjusted, but almost to a fault. But I also philosophically, and I could argue like physiologically or biomechanically too, I don't love decompression. For a lot of reasons. We don't have to get into them on this podcast, but I have best friends who have multi-million-dollar practices who crush it with decompression. I just have my own theories about how it works and what it does to the system. So there's just things in there where I don't think any of it's bad or wrong or even overhyped. It's just like, I personally am always going to go get adjusted first. And I think that we can prevent. So like, here's an example. Okay. So decompression, we're doing it for a crushed disc, right? But we know like, dude, how many times has someone had something drop on their head and their spine breaks before a disc blows up? All the time. Yeah. So like that would, just based on evidence, it's more likely that the disc is actually stronger than the bones are. So then where did the compression come from? Well, lack of movement of the joints of the spine. So philosophically, I just get into like, we could prevent that stuff where we wouldn't need decompression. So that's why like part of me feels like it's overhyped, but I also know that it works. Like I said, I have best friends who have amazing practices that do all this stuff. Yeah. But no, dude, none of it's overhyped. Like laser is amazing. I've used laser. It works awesome. Piezo wave is super cool. I love that that's kind of blowing up right now. Cause I've seen people get, knee surgeries canceled from it. So I'm like, why would we not want that for people? So
laser fixed my knees. No, it did. It did. Laser did literally fix my knees. I felt like I had, 200-year-old knees, last year. And, part of my, my care plan and my therapy was laser. And it's amazing. The regeneration that happens. And I mean, it's unbelievable. I could do squats now, not like regular squats, like squats with with weights, come on. But anyway, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Anyway. So if you had, let's close this out with a challenge question. If you had unlimited resources to invest in your practice or the chiropractic profession in general, what's the one thing you would create or change?
If I had unlimited resources,
Yes.
I don't know that I would. I've kind of already started creating it. That's a whole other conversation. I think we would just start on like a grand scale, teaching chiros how to actually measure the brain and adjust accordingly. That would be the number one thing. So that would, I mean, it would just require like mass marketing. It would it would have to do with getting into the schools. It would probably have to do with like rewriting curriculum. This is like 100-year vision, not a next year vision.
Makes sense.
That would just bring more people and chiros to the place where like, hey, every person already has the gifts within themselves to heal. It's just a matter of how do we unleash that within the brain and nervous system.
Got it. Love it. That's awesome, man. Long-term vision. That's what we all need.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on the prize. So, all right. I want to talk about what keeps you motivated, because it's hard to not just run a business. It's hard to be in an industry that has all this kind of negative, just back talk and people, all the misinformation around it, and so it's hard to be in that industry as well. It's hard to get that all out of your mind and really provide the best patient care possible. It's hard to be around all that all the time and be a good father, a good husband, all that, right? So, but what keeps you motivated to continue to really growing your practice and just not stopping?
Dude, twofold is one, I think the most important, anybody who got into business, like, yeah, we want to help people for sure, but there's a real special thing about being able to have a business that allows you to just have freedom to spend time with your family. And as crazy as that sounds, where I know there's like a grind and hustle culture and then like neglect your family for the first 3 years and then we can get it back around to the family later. Like for me, the more I'm filled up at home, the more I get to pour into people at the office. Mm-hmm. And then like, what do we see with that? More families who have changes that have rippled throughout their entire family inside of practice. That is more like when people say, oh, you got to work today. Dude, I can't even call my practice work. I literally say go into the office because it's one of the most fulfilling things possible besides watching my daughter grow and hanging out with my wife. Like there's nothing better. So for me, that's motivating. And then, I sat with a patient last week and she told me, she sat down with me. She's like, hey, you see my daughter, you see my daughter-in-law, you see my grandson, and I see her. And she's like, if you knew like how God is working through our family right now, she's like, I literally attribute it to you and how you waking your brain. So again, I'm not the fixer, dude. God gave us the gifts of healing.
Amen.
But that right there, that's a whole 4 generations of family effect. Wow. How could you not wake up every morning and be just completely inspired by that? You know what I'm saying? And then at the end of the day, and I'm stoked because I'm like, Head, you won't believe this story of what this woman told me. And then Coco's like, Dad, what's the connection between chiropractic care and like, how are people connecting with God? And she wants to know. And it's just one of those things, man, that's like, I can't think of anything better. There's no numbers in a bank account. There's no drug. There's nothing that could give you that fulfillment.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
I love that. So for those people that are in your area, patients specifically in the Newport Beach area or DCs around the world, wherever they're listening, and they want to get in contact with you, they have questions. Maybe they want to book an appointment, right, as a patient. How can they do that?
Yeah, so the easiest way is going to be our website, which is just Nexus, Nexus Family Chiropractic.com. My Instagram is Dr. Daniel Kimbley. You can always reach out there. Those are probably the 2 easiest ways.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about why you named it Nexus.
So Nexus means connection, linking 2 or more things, or the most important central point or place. So if we think about our we cannot have life if we don't have a nervous system. So our nervous system, our brain, is literally our connection to life. And then I would go one step further now, and we could explain embryological structures and how the brain develops and get into the cortex, and how I truly believe that our connection to God happens through the nervous system. So again, the connection point between the spiritual and the flesh. And then lastly is like, we wanted to be that connection, that central most important point that connects people to what true health actually is. What God put inside of every person's body.
Oh, there's like purpose behind everything you do, man. It's just so cool. I love it. I love it. Okay, so for anyone listening, whether they're a chiropractor, athlete, parent, child, dog, I don't know, what's the one daily habit they should start today for a better nervous system health?
I'm going to say chiropractic care, but that's a cop out. So get adjusted.
It is a cop out.
Always a given.
Yeah.
But
set that aside.
Dude, man, every time, okay, so I'll go two. I'll go one that's probably a little bit edgier first, and then I'll go one that's a little even more practical. So,
okay,
prayer and or meditation, whatever you want to call it. Dude, there is an abundance of research that supports that praying or meditating, I pray, strengthens the frontal cortex. Like it just does. It's irrefutable at this point. And so the more we can put ourselves in those states, we're going to allow better regulation of our nervous system overall. But that requires a commitment. Like I was just listening to a podcast where I heard a woman say we should be praying for 3 hours a day minimum. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know where she's getting that 3 hours. So I have some work to do for sure. So that one's a little bit like the edgier one. That's probably a little bit harder for people to wrap their heads around, but highly supported by research. The other one, which I've done this for a long time, but dude, the science just continues to prove over and over again, is cold exposure. So like cold plunging, it forces you into, you have to actively fight against every emotion and will and your hormonal system to get out of cold water. And when you're doing that, you're building the resiliency of the frontal part of the brain.
What about cold showers?
Yeah, same thing, dude.
Is that same thing?
Yeah, I think that this is going to sound funny, and I know that the research disproves this, but I'm going to say it anyway. From a mental perspective, I promise you, dude, it is easier to get in a cold tub where the water completely surrounds you than it is to be in the shower. Because like there's no escape if you're in the cold tub. So you just are like, all right, this is what it is. But in the shower, you can dance around and get one side warm and the other side cold, and then harder to get the other side cold because it's already warm. Where like cold, you're just in, you're in. So I would argue that mentally a cold shower is actually more difficult than a cold plunge.
Yeah. So I used to take cold showers. So I was, years ago, I was on another separate, health journey. And I mention this all the time, but I lost a ton of weight. And in that kind of, we'll say 2-year span, I would join a couple of those kind of health competitions. And one of the things I read about was, doing these cold showers, not just wakes you up, right? But actually you could potentially shed fat cells as well because of the way your body's kind of reacting to the water, and it could also tighten your skin.
Yep.
I don't know if that's scientifically proven or what, but I read it. So I was taking cold showers. I think I'm going to start up again.
Yeah. Dude, it boosts testosterone. So it's your metabolism is going to naturally increase, and your body, and like there's a thermic effect too. So if you're cold, your body's going to try to warm itself up. Yeah. So 100% true.
Yeah. Dr. Daniel, this has just been unbelievable. Great learning experience for me. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for the time, man. So glad to be here.
I think we established 2 things today. One, if your nervous system is out of whack, your entire life is out of whack. Plain and simple. And then 2, Dr. Daniel might just be a modern day health Jedi. I don't know, maybe. So if you're tired of feeling sluggish, foggy, just, a little bit off, we say that all the time. It might be time to get your spine and your life adjusted. Hit up Dr. Kimbley if you're in the area. Give your nervous system some love. And let's get this brain-body connection firing on all cylinders. Yeah, so let's agree on that. But until next time, keep your posture tall, and your adjustments regular. Please subscribe, share this. If it at all, spoke to you in any way, place some comments, couple likes, whatever you got to do. But thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.
All right.
Mom, amazing.